before time had meaning, before kingdoms rose from the earth, before even the concept of light and shadow existed, there was only chaos. The realm that would one day become Hyrule was formless, an infinite void where possibility itself waited in silence. And from that silence came 3 divine beings whose power would reshape reality itself. The golden goddesses descended upon the chaos with purpose that transcended mortal understanding. Din, goddess of power, blazed with crimson fire that could forge worlds. Nehru, goddess of wisdom, carried the deep blue essence of order and reason. Farore, goddess of courage, radiated green light that would breathe life into emptiness. These 3 divine entities looked upon the formless chaos and began the greatest act of creation the universe would ever witness. Din moved first, her flaming arms spreading wide as she poured her essence into the void. The earth trembled into being, mountains erupting from nothingness, valleys carving themselves into the newly formed ground. She sculpted the red earth, creating the physical foundation upon which all future events would unfold. The land masses took shape, continents forming and reforming as her power rippled through the emerging world. Volcanoes burst forth, their molten cores a testament to Din's fiery nature. The bedrock of reality itself solidified under her touch, creating a stage vast enough for the drama that would span millennia. When Din's work reached completion, Nehru stepped forward. Where Din had created physical form, Nehru would establish cosmic law. She poured forth her essence, and suddenly the chaos knew order. Time began its inexorable march forward. The sun and moon took their positions in the newly formed sky, beginning their eternal dance. The laws of physics locked into place, gravity binding the world together, the cycle of day and night establishing rhythm where before there had been only stillness. Nehru's blue light washed over everything, transforming randomness into predictable patterns, chaos into cosmos. The very concept of cause and effect became reality through her divine will. With the stage set and the rules established, Farore unleashed her power upon the barren world. Green light erupted across the landscape, and suddenly the emptiness teemed with potential. Plants burst from the soil, their roots digging deep into Din's earth, their growth following Nehru's laws. Animals of every conceivable kind materialized, filling the forests, oceans, and skies. But Farore's greatest gift was yet to come. From her essence, she created the living races that would inherit this world. The first beings emerged, not as fully formed civilizations, but as raw life force ready to evolve and adapt. These early life forms carried within them something precious, something that would define all the ages to come, the potential for courage, the spark that would allow mortals to stand against impossible odds. The 3 goddesses beheld their completed work, the world now pulsing with life and possibility. But before their departure, they would leave behind something of immeasurable importance. At the point where their 3 essences had first touched the world, where their divine powers had intermingled and merged, they created the Triforce. This golden relic contained a fragment of their own divinity, 3 golden triangles forming a perfect whole. The Triforce embodied everything they represented, power, wisdom, and courage in perfect balance. Yet the goddesses understood something fundamental about the nature of power. In the wrong hands, the Triforce could unmake everything they had created, so they established it in a place beyond normal reach, hidden in what would come to be called the Sacred Realm, a dimension that existed parallel to the physical world yet separate from it. Only those worthy, those who possessed a balance of all 3 divine virtues, could claim the Triforce as a whole. Anyone whose heart leaned too heavily toward one aspect would find the Triforce splitting, granting them only the piece that resonated with their nature, while the other pieces scattered to those who embodied the remaining virtues. Having completed their work, the golden goddesses departed for the heavens, leaving behind not just a world but the very foundation of destiny itself. The point from which they ascended became sacred, a tear in the fabric of reality where the divine and mortal realms brushed against each other. This place, in time, would be known by many names, but always it would remain touched by holiness, a reminder that gods had once walked upon this earth. But the goddesses had not left the world entirely unattended. Before their ascension, they had appointed a guardian, a deity who would remain behind to watch over the Triforce in the sacred land. This being, born of divine purpose, was the goddess Hylia. She embodied aspects of all three goddesses, though she was not their equal in power. Hylia became the protector of the early world, watching as the races the goddesses had created began to flourish and evolve. The world in these ancient days bore little resemblance to the Hyrule that would come later. The land masses were different, the civilizations primitive by later standards, yet already the fundamental forces that would shape all of history were taking root. The Triforce rested in its sacred chamber, pulsing with golden light, waiting for the day when mortal hands would reach for divine power. Among the early races, some showed particular promise. Beings of varying forms populated the surface world, living in harmony with the land and each other. They had not yet discovered the heights of civilization, but they possessed something equally valuable: wonder. They gazed up at the sky with reverence, knowing in their hearts that something greater had created all they saw. Some among them began to sense the divine presence more keenly than others, and these individuals became the first priests, the first keepers of sacred knowledge. Hylia watched over them all, her divine sight seeing not just the present but shadows of possible futures. She saw the potential for both greatness and catastrophe in these mortal races, and she knew, with a certainty that chilled even her divine essence, that a great evil would one day rise to challenge everything the goddesses had built. So Hylia began her own preparations, setting in motion plans that would echo across ages, influencing events thousands of years hence. The sacred realm where the Triforce rested existed in a state of perpetual golden light. This dimension reflected the hearts of those who entered it, a malleable reality that responded to the nature of visitors. In its pure state, untouched by mortal hands, it was paradise itself. Lush fields stretched endlessly, rivers of crystal water flowed with impossible purity, and the very air hummed with divine energy. The Temple of Light stood at its centre, a massive structure of white stone and gold that housed the Triforce within its innermost sanctum. This temple was not merely a building, but a living embodiment of the goddess's will. Its architecture defied mortal understanding, with passages that seemed to extend into infinity and chambers that existed in impossible geometries. At its heart, in a chamber accessible only through trials of virtue, the Triforce waited on a pedestal of sacred stone. 3 golden triangles, each perfect in form, hovered in formation, casting warm light that penetrated every corner of the temple. The top triangle represented power, the lower right wisdom, and the lower left courage. Together, they formed the ultimate prize, the wish-granting relic that could reshape reality itself. But the Triforce was not sentient. It held no moral judgment, no capacity to determine right from wrong. It was pure divine power, neutral and absolute. Whoever touched it with a balanced heart would gain the ability to remake the world according to their desires. Whoever touched it with imbalance would cause it to shatter, each piece seeking out the person who best embodied its virtue. This quality would prove both blessing and curse in the ages to come. In the early world, before recorded history, a race of people lived on the surface who would eventually be called the Hylians, though they did not yet know that name. These people possessed pointed ears, said to allow them to hear the voices of the gods more clearly than other races. Whether this was literal truth or comforting mythology, it became their defining characteristic. They were not the only people, but they held a special connection to the divine, perhaps because Hylia watched over them with particular care. The early Hylians lived simply, in small communities scattered across the landscape. They had not yet mastered metalworking or complex architecture. Their lives were governed by the rhythms of nature, planting and harvest, birth and death, the turning of seasons. Yet even in this primitive state they possessed something that would prove crucial in the trials ahead, an unshakable faith. They built simple shrines to honour the goddesses, offering prayers and thanks for the bounty of the world. They told stories around fires, tales of creation and divine power that would be passed down through countless generations, evolving and changing, but never entirely losing their essential truth. Among these early peoples, certain individuals demonstrated abilities that seemed to transcend normal human limitations. Some could sense approaching danger before it arrived. Others could soothe the sick with touch and prayer. A rare few claimed to hear whispers on the wind, voices that spoke of things to come. These gifted individuals became the spiritual leaders of their communities, the bridge between mortal and divine. But not all was peaceful in this ancient world. Even in paradise, darkness found ways to take root. The first monsters began to appear, creatures of shadow and malice that seemed to materialize from nightmares made flesh. These early demons were crude, more beast than intelligent threat, but they heralded something worse to come. They attacked settlements, drove people from their homes, and proved that even in a world touched by divine hands, evil could flourish. Hylia recognized these monsters as symptoms of a deeper sickness. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the world's edge, something ancient and terrible was stirring. A demon of such power and hatred that even the goddess felt the chill of its awakening. This being had existed since the Age of Chaos, perhaps even before the goddesses arrived. It had watched their act of creation with envious rage, seeing the ordered world as an affront to the beautiful chaos that had preceded it. And now, after ages of dormant hatred, it was gathering its strength. The demon's name would be spoken in terror for millennia to come. Demise. He was hatred incarnate, the antithesis of everything the goddesses had created. Where they brought life, he brought death. Where they established order, he spread chaos. Where they offered hope, he delivered despair. Demise was not merely evil, he was the concept of evil made flesh, a force of nature as unstoppable as a storm and far more malevolent. As Demise's power grew in the outer darkness, his influence began to seep into the world like poison into water. The monsters became more numerous and more vicious. Strange blights affected crops, causing famine where before there had been plenty. The very land itself seemed to sicken in places, as if Demise's hatred could corrupt the earth the goddesses had formed. The early people suffered under these afflictions, not understanding their source but sensing that something fundamental had shifted in the nature of reality. Hylia knew what was coming. Her divine sight had pierced the veil of time, showing her the horror that approached. Demise would not be content with mere destruction. He sought the Triforce itself, intending to use its power to unmake the goddess's creation and reshape the world into a reflection of his own twisted desires. If he succeeded, everything, every living thing, every moment of beauty and joy that had ever existed would be erased and replaced with eternal suffering. The goddess faced an impossible choice. She could not destroy Demise. His power rivaled her own, and in direct confrontation neither could claim certain victory. Even if she could defeat him, she lacked the ability to permanently end his existence. Demise was too fundamental, too ancient, too much a part of the cosmic balance between creation and destruction. But Hylia was wise, and she understood that wisdom often succeeds where power fails. She would not try to destroy Demise. Instead, she would seal him away and set in motion a plan that would span ages, a plan that would require the greatest sacrifice she could make. The goddess gathered the mortal races and spoke to them of the coming catastrophe. She told them of Demise and his demon hordes, of the war that would soon engulf their world. The people heard her words with terror, for how could mortals stand against such evil? But Hylia offered them hope. She would fight alongside them, lending her divine power to their cause, and she would ensure that even if this battle was lost, the war itself would continue across the ages until Demise was finally permanently defeated. Hylia began preparing the mortal races for war. She taught them to forge weapons and armor, skills they had never needed in the peaceful world they had known. She showed them how to work together, how to coordinate their efforts against a common enemy. Most importantly, she gave them courage, filling their hearts with the will to stand firm in the face of impossible odds. These mortals, so fragile compared to the forces arrayed against them, would need to become something more. They would need to become heroes. But Hylia's most important preparation was secret, hidden even from those she protected. She selected a small portion of the mortal races, those she deemed most worthy, and prepared them for a different fate. These chosen people would not fight in the coming war. Instead, they would survive it, preserved to inherit the world that would emerge from the ashes. She created a hidden sanctuary for them, a place beyond Demise's reach, where they would wait until the darkness had passed. The war, when it came, exceeded even Hylia's dire predictions. Demise emerged from the darkness at the head of an army of demons, monsters, and corrupted souls. The Demon King himself was a figure of terrible majesty, towering above his servants, wreathed in flames that burned black and red. His power was so great that his mere presence scorched the earth, leaving footprints that smouldered for days. He wielded a sword of darkness, a blade that seemed to drink in light itself, and where he struck, nothing survived. The mortal armies, brave as they were, proved almost helpless against this onslaught. For every demon they cut down, 10 more appeared. The monsters knew no fear, no hesitation, and they fought with savage ferocity that mortal warriors could barely comprehend. Cities fell, one after another. The carefully tended fields were trampled and burned. Rivers ran red with blood, and the sky itself seemed to darken, as if the sun could not bear to witness the slaughter below. Hylia fought at the forefront of every battle, her divine power the only thing standing between the mortal races and total annihilation. She wielded the power of light itself, her attacks carving through demon ranks like a scythe through wheat. Where she passed, the darkness retreated, if only temporarily. The mortals rallied around her presence, finding in their goddess the strength to continue fighting, even when all hope seemed lost. But even Hylia's might could not turn the tide of this war. Demise was too powerful, his armies too numerous. Slowly, inexorably, the forces of darkness pushed the armies of light back. The goddess realized that direct combat would never achieve victory. she would have to resort to a contingency plan, the desperate gambit she'd prepared for this very possibility. Hylia enacted her plan with precision born of desperation. She gathered her chosen mortals, those she had secretly prepared for salvation, and led them to a section of the land where her divine power was strongest. This area, lush and beautiful, would become their refuge. Using the full extent of her divine abilities, Hylia performed a miracle that defied comprehension. She tore this portion of the earth itself free from the surface world, lifting it high into the sky, far beyond the reach of Demise and his hordes. The mortals watched in awe and terror as the ground beneath their feet rose upward, breaking free from the world they had known. Higher and higher they climbed, passing through clouds, ascending into a realm of endless sky. Hylia placed them beyond a barrier of clouds so thick that the surface world became invisible below, a distant memory obscured by white mist. She created this floating sanctuary, which would in time be called Skyloft, as a paradise where mortals could live in safety while war raged below. But Hylia did not stop with merely protecting the people. She also created guardians to watch over them. From the clouds themselves she formed beings of gentle nature and fierce loyalty, creatures that would bond with the humans and serve as their companions. These were the Loftwings, massive birds with wingspans that could blot out the sun, yet possessing temperaments as gentle as doves. Each human would bond with their own Loftwing in a connection so deep it transcended mere friendship. The Loftwings became extensions of their riders, allowing the people of the sky to soar freely through their new realm. On Skyloft and the other sky islands Hylia created, the chosen people began to build a new civilization. They constructed homes from the native wood and stone of their floating sanctuary, designed to withstand the winds that constantly swept through the sky. They established farms, learning to cultivate the unique plants that grew in this elevated realm. They created a society built around flight and their Loftwing companions, developing traditions and customs unlike anything that had existed on the surface. The Knight Academy was founded to train protectors, though what they would protect against in this peaceful paradise none could say. It was as if they sensed on some deep level that their sanctuary was only temporary. Hylia visited the people of the sky, walking among them in mortal guise, ensuring their safety and happiness. But her heart remained heavy with the knowledge of what she must do next. The battle against Demise was not yet won. Indeed, it had barely begun. On the surface world, the war reached its terrible climax. Hylia had created a weapon, a blade of sacred power that she believed could seal Demise away. This goddess sword contained a fraction of her own divine essence, making it the only weapon capable of harming the Demon King. But to wield it required more than mere strength. It required a mortal with a spirit strong enough to channel divine power, a hero who could stand before Demise without faltering. Such a hero existed, though he did not yet know his destiny. A young man, brave and pure of heart, who had fought alongside the goddess throughout the war. Hylia had watched him carefully, seeing in him qualities that transcended his mortal limitations. He possessed courage that burned like an eternal flame, wisdom beyond his years, and though he lacked divine power, his spirit was strong enough that the goddess believed he could become the vessel for her plan. The final battle took place at the site that would later be known as the Sealed Grounds, a massive pit that scarred the earth like a wound that would never fully heal. Hylia confronted Demise there, and their clash shook the very foundations of the world. The goddess fought with every ounce of power she possessed, matching the Demon King blow for blow. The sky itself split open from the force of their combat. Mountains crumbled, the earth cracked and reformed. For days and nights, the battle raged, neither side gaining permanent advantage. But Hylia had not come to destroy Demise. She knew such a thing was beyond her capability. Instead, she had come to seal him, to imprison him in a way that would hold for countless ages. Using the Goddess Sword as a focus, she poured her divine power into creating a seal of unbreakable strength. The seal would not merely trap Demise in one location, it would imprison him in time itself, locking him in a state between existence and non-existence, unable to act upon the world yet not truly defeated. The effort nearly destroyed her. Creating a seal powerful enough to hold a being of Demise's magnitude required almost all of Hylia's divine essence. She felt her power draining away, her immortality bleeding into the seal. But she did not falter. She drove the Goddess Sword deep into the ground at the center of the sealed grounds, creating the sealed temple around it, a structure that would guard the seal for millennia. Demise's essence was drawn into the earth, imprisoned beneath layers of divine power that would hold him dormant. But even as she completed the seal, Hylia knew it was not permanent. Demise's hatred was too strong, his power too fundamental to reality itself. Eventually the seal would weaken, eventually he would break free, and when that day came, the world would need a hero to face him. A mortal strong enough to wield the full power of the Goddess Sword, transformed into the legendary Master Sword. This knowledge led Hylia to make the ultimate sacrifice. She could remain a goddess, watching over the world from the divine realm, but without the power to directly intervene when Demise inevitably returned. Or she could give up her divinity entirely, being reborn as a mortal so that she could remain in the world, guide the hero when he appeared, and ensure that the necessary pieces were in place for Demise's final defeat. Hylia chose mortality. She established a plan that would unfold across ages, a carefully orchestrated series of events that would lead to the hero's rise and Demise's ultimate destruction. She left instructions with her most trusted followers, creating the precursors to what would eventually become the Sheikah tribe, guardians who would protect sacred knowledge across the centuries. She hid pieces of her power throughout the land, creating trials that would test any who sought to claim them, and then, having set everything in motion, she surrendered her divinity and allowed herself to be reborn as a mortal child. This child would be born in the sky, among the people Hylia had saved. She would have no memory of her divine past, at least not at first. She would live as a normal mortal, subject to all the weaknesses and limitations that entailed. But when the time was right, when Demise began to stir once more, her true nature would begin to awaken. She would remember who she had been and understand the role she must play in the battle to come. Thousands of years passed in relative peace. On the surface world, the scars of the ancient war slowly healed. Forests grew over battlefields. Rivers cleared of the blood that had stained them. New races emerged and evolved, inheriting a world that had forgotten the terror of Demise's reign. The demons that survived the war retreated to dark corners of the world, remnants of the Demon King's army, waiting for their master's return even if they did not consciously understand that was what they were doing. In the sky, generations of humans lived and died, never knowing the surface world existed. To them, the clouds below were an impenetrable barrier, and the sky was all that existed. They built a thriving civilization among the floating islands, their lives centered around their loft-wing companions and the traditions that had developed over centuries. They worshipped the goddess Hylia, though her name had become more legend than living memory. They told stories of the surface, of a land of evil and monsters that existed somewhere below the clouds, but these tales were treated as myths, cautionary stories told to children. The Knight Academy on Skyloft continued to train young warriors, though the purpose had become more ceremonial than practical. What need did the peaceful Sky Realm have for knights? Yet the tradition continued, passed down through generations who felt compelled to maintain it even without understanding why. The wing ceremony became the most important event in any young person's life, the moment when they proved their skill in flight and took their place as adults in society. In one such generation, a boy was born who seemed unremarkable in every way. He had no special powers, no obvious destiny. He was simply Link, a student at the Knight Academy, known for sleeping in and having a kind heart. His closest friend was a girl named Zelda, the daughter of Gaepora, the headmaster of the academy. The two had been inseparable since childhood, and their bond was evident to everyone who knew them. What no one realized was that this was exactly as Hylia had planned, thousands of years earlier. Link and Zelda grew up together, their friendship deepening with each passing year. They flew together on their loft wings, explored the Sky Islands, and shared their dreams of the future. Link hoped to become a knight, though he lacked the natural talent of some of his peers. Zelda, meanwhile, felt drawn to the ancient stories of the goddess, spending hours in the statue of Hylia that stood in Skyloft, praying and seeking understanding of feelings she could not quite explain. The day of the wing ceremony arrived, a festival celebrating the coming of age of the Academy's senior students. Link was set to participate, competing in an aerial race that would determine the hierarchy among his peers. He had trained hard for this moment, knowing that Zelda would be watching. What neither of them knew was that this day would shatter the peaceful existence they had always known, and set in motion events that had been ordained millennia before their birth. The ceremony began with celebration and excitement. Link took to the air on his crimson loftwing, a rare bird that had bonded with him as a child. The race was challenging, requiring precise control and intimate knowledge of the Sky Island's geography. Link flew with determination, navigating through rings and around obstacles, competing against his rival Groose and the other students. When he caught the bird statuette that Zelda had dropped as the prize, completing the ceremony victoriously, it seemed like nothing more than a moment of triumph among friends. But then Zelda asked Link to join her for a private flight, just the two of them soaring through the clouds. They flew together in the golden light of afternoon, and for a moment everything was perfect. Zelda seemed on the verge of confessing feelings she had held close to her heart, words that Link had longed to hear. The world hung in that perfect moment, balanced on the edge of change. Then the darkness struck. A black tornado erupted from the clouds below, a swirling vortex of malevolent energy that had not been seen in the sky for thousands of years. The tornado reached up like a massive hand grasping for Zelda. Her loftwing screeched in terror as the dark magic pulled at them. Link flew desperately toward his friend, reaching out, but the magic was too strong. Zelda was torn from her loftwing and pulled down into the tornado, vanishing beneath the clouds with a scream that would haunt Link's nightmares. Link dove after her without hesitation, plunging into the tornado despite knowing it meant almost certain death. His loftwing tried to follow but was buffeted back by the violent winds. The darkness swallowed Link, spinning him violently, robbing him of breath and sense. He felt himself falling, tumbling through empty air, the clouds rushing past him in a disorienting blur. Then everything went black. He awoke in the night, lying on a small platform inside the statue of the goddess in Skyloft. His head throbbed, and his body ached from injuries he didn't remember receiving. As he struggled to sit up, a voice spoke to him from the darkness, a voice he'd never heard before yet somehow recognized. A glowing feminine figure materialized before him, introducing herself as Fi, the spirit of the Goddess Sword. Fi explained what Link could barely comprehend. Zelda had been pulled to the surface, a land that existed below the clouds, a world that the people of Skyloft had forgotten. Fi told him of his destiny, of the goddess's ancient plan, of the role he was meant to play. She revealed the existence of the Goddess Sword, sleeping within the statue, waiting for the hero who would claim it. Link listened with growing disbelief and determination. He didn't care about destiny or ancient plans. He only knew that Zelda was in danger, and he would brave any peril to save her. Link pulled the Goddess Sword from its pedestal, feeling its weight in his hands, sensing the faint pulse of divine power within the blade. Fi emerged fully, her form crystalline and strange, speaking in measured tones that conveyed information without emotion. She guided him to a passage that led down through the statue, a hidden route that would take him to the surface world. As Link descended, passing through the cloud barrier that had separated sky and surface for millennia, he could not have known that he was fulfilling prophecy, walking a path the Goddess Hylia had laid out thousands of years before his birth. The surface world that greeted Link bore no resemblance to the peaceful sky realm he had left behind. Dense forests stretched in every direction, filled with creatures he had never imagined. Monsters roamed freely, beasts of shadow and malice that attacked on sight. The air itself felt different, heavier, charged with ancient energies that made his skin prickle. This was a world of beauty and danger in equal measure, a world that had existed beneath his feet his entire life, unknown and forgotten. Fi guided Link to the sealed temple, an ancient structure overgrown with vines and weathered by countless centuries. Inside, an old woman waited, a mysterious figure who seemed to know far more than she revealed. She spoke in riddles and prophecies, telling Link that to save Zelda, he would need to prove himself worthy, to undergo trials that would test every aspect of his character. The Goddess Sword he carried was not yet strong enough to fulfill its true purpose. It needed to be strengthened, transformed into the legendary Master Sword through sacred flames hidden across the surface world. And so Link's journey truly began. He ventured into the Faron Woods, a mystical forest where the Kikwi people lived in fear of monsters. He discovered the first sacred flame in a temple deep within the woods, solving puzzles and battling guardians that tested his courage and ingenuity. The flame empowered his sword, and Fi explained that this was only the beginning. 2 more flames waited in distant lands, each presenting challenges greater than the last. Link travelled to Eldin Volcano, a region of intense heat and flowing lava where the Mogma people burrowed through the earth. The trials here tested his endurance and determination, forcing him to navigate through scalding caverns and face creatures born of living flame. The second sacred flame awaited in the Earth Temple, guarded by challenges that pushed Link to his limits. When he claimed it, his sword grew stronger still, the divine power within it awakening further. The third flame lay in Lanayru Desert, a vast wasteland that had once been a thriving ocean before some ancient catastrophe had drained it dry. Here Link discovered remnants of an advanced civilization. The ancient robots that had once served the people of this land now rusted and dormant. Through the power of time-shift stones, mysterious artifacts that could temporarily restore the past within a limited area, Link witnessed what this region had been before disaster struck. The Lanayru mining facility held the final flame, and claiming it required Link to master control over time itself, shifting between past and present to solve puzzles that spanned centuries. With all three flames claimed, Link returned to the sealed temple. The Goddess Sword had absorbed the sacred fires, and now it could complete its transformation. The old woman guided Link in a ritual that would fundamentally change the blade. As divine power surged through the weapon, it transformed, its form shifting, its essence crystallizing into something beyond mortal crafting. The Goddess Sword became the Master Sword, the blade of evil's bane, a weapon specifically designed to destroy Demise when the time came. But even with the Master Sword in hand, Link's quest was far from complete. The old woman revealed more of the truth he needed to understand. Zelda was not merely a victim in all this. She was the mortal reincarnation of the Goddess Hylia, though she did not yet remember her divine nature. The tornado that had pulled her to the surface had been summoned by Girahim, a demon who served as the sword spirit of Demise, seeking to use Zelda to resurrect his master. Link's journey became a race against time. He pursued Girahim across the surface world, always one step behind as the demon lord moved Zelda from place to place, performing rituals meant to awaken her memories as the goddess. Link witnessed Zelda's transformation from afar, saw her remembering who she truly was, understanding the role she was meant to play. At the Temple of Time, in a moment that broke his heart, Zelda explained everything to Link before sealing herself in a crystal of amber, entering a timeless sleep that would strengthen the seal on Demise. Zelda told Link of Hylia's plan, of how the goddess had given up her divinity to be reborn as a mortal, all to ensure that she would be present when Demise inevitably began to break free from his imprisonment. By placing herself in the crystal sleep, Zelda would reinforce the seal, buying time for Link to gather the power he would need to destroy Demise permanently. She apologized for the burden this placed on him, tears streaming down her face as she explained that he alone could complete the task. Then the crystal enclosed her, and she was gone, frozen in time, unreachable. Link stood before Zelda's crystallized form, the Master Sword gripped in his white-knuckled hands, and made a vow. He would become strong enough to defeat Demise. He would save Zelda, not because prophecy demanded it, but because she was his friend, the most important person in his world. The trials he had faced thus far had been preparations. Now the real test would begin. The old woman revealed her final secret. She was Impa, a member of the Shaker tribe, guardians of the goddess's knowledge. But more than that, she was not from this time. She had travelled from the past, from the era of the goddess herself, to guide Link through his journey. And for the next phase, Link would need to follow her into the past, to gather the components necessary to strengthen the Master Sword beyond even its current legendary status, using the Gate of Time, an ancient portal that could bridge millennia. Link travelled backward through history to an era when the surface world was still recovering from the war against Demise. He emerged in a time when Hylia still walked among mortals in her divine form, when the wounds of battle were fresh upon the land. The goddess herself was there, though weakened from creating the seal that imprisoned Demise. She looked upon Link with eyes that held infinite sadness and infinite hope. Hylia explained the final pieces of the puzzle. The Master Sword, powerful as it was, still lacked the strength to permanently destroy Demise. It needed to be tempered, blessed with the power of the Triforce itself. She told Link of the Silent Realms, sacred trials that existed in a dimension parallel to reality, where he could prove his courage and claim the gifts the goddess had hidden, specifically for the hero who would one day appear. Each trial would test him in ways that went beyond mere combat, examining the very essence of his spirit, Link entered the Silent Realms, stepping into a nightmare version of the lands he had come to know. In these twisted reflections of reality, he was stripped of his weapons and equipment, left defenseless as he raced to collect sacred tears while being pursued by invincible guardians. The slightest touch from these phantoms would mean failure and expulsion from the trial. The tension was unbearable, each trial pushing Link to the absolute limits of his courage and endurance. But Link succeeded where countless hypothetical heroes before him would have failed. He collected the tears, completed the trials, and claimed the gifts the goddess had left for him. With each successful trial, he grew stronger, not just in power, but in spirit. He was becoming something more than an ordinary mortal, transforming into the legendary hero that prophecy had foretold. The Triforce, sensing his balanced heart, revealed itself to him. In the Sky Keep, a final sanctuary that tested everything Link had learned, he proved himself worthy of the ultimate prize. The 3 golden triangles of the Triforce assembled before him, and for the first time in ages a mortal stood before the wish-granting relic with a heart pure enough to claim it as a whole. The Triforce did not split. It recognized in Link the perfect balance of power, wisdom, and courage that the goddesses had intended. Link made his wish with singular focus. He wished for the complete and utter destruction of Demise, for the Demon King to be erased from existence so thoroughly that his threat would never again darken the world. The Triforce glowed with golden radiance, accepting the wish, beginning to reshape reality according to Link's will. But even divine power had its limitations. Demise's essence was too deeply woven into the fabric of the world to simply erase. Instead, the Triforce weakened the seal holding him, forcing the Demon King to manifest in a weakened state where he could be destroyed by mortal hands wielding the Master Sword. Girahim, who had been pursuing his own scheme throughout Link's journey, succeeded in his final goal. He shattered the seal on Demise, absorbing the Demon King's essence into himself, transforming into a blade. The resurrected Demise emerged at the sealed grounds, his power diminished but still terrible to behold. The Demon King looked upon Link with burning eyes, recognizing in this mortal the interference that had weakened him. For the first time since his imprisonment began, Demise stood free in the world, and his rage shook the heavens. But Link did not falter. Gripping the Master Sword empowered by the Triforce and forged specifically to destroy this enemy, he challenged Demise to single combat. The goddess's plan had led to this moment. Everything, across thousands of years, had been building toward this confrontation between the Demon King and the hero chosen to destroy him. The battle between Link and Demise transcended anything the young hero had faced before. Demise wielded his own dark blade with skill that came from eons of existence, each strike carrying enough force to split mountains. Lightning crashed around them as they fought, drawn by Demise's power. The Demon King was holding back, almost amused by the mortal who dared challenge him, but as the fight progressed, that amusement faded. Link was matching him, more than matching him. The Master Sword sang as it clashed against Demise's blade, divine power meeting demonic hatred in explosions of light and shadow. Link adapted to Demise's fighting style, learning to anticipate the Demon King's movements. When lightning struck, Link charged the Master Sword with electrical energy, turning Demise's own power against him. The battle raged across the sealed grounds, their clash of blades creating shock waves that scarred the earth. Demise's confidence began to crack as he realized this mortal was truly threatening him, that the impossible was occurring. With a final desperate strike, Link drove the Master Sword deep into Demise's chest. The Demon King staggered, disbelief written across his inhuman features. He had been defeated, not sealed, not imprisoned, but truly defeated by a mortal wielding a goddess's blade. As Demise fell to his knees, the full realization of his defeat crashed over him, but Demise's final act was not surrender. With his last breath, the Demon King spoke words that would echo across all of time, a curse that would bind Link, Zelda, and himself together in an eternal cycle. He proclaimed that his hatred would never die, that it would be reborn again and again throughout the ages. Those who share the blood of the goddess and the spirit of the hero would be forever cursed to face incarnations of his malice. This cycle of resurrection and conflict would repeat endlessly, an eternal struggle between light and darkness until the end of time itself. As Demise spoke these words, his essence began to dissolve, but the curse took root in the very fabric of destiny. Link absorbed Demise's remains into the Master Sword, imprisoning the Demon King's spirit within the blade itself. Fi, the sword spirit, assured Link that Demise was sealed beyond any possibility of return. But the curse remained, a shadow over all possible futures, a guarantee that peace would never be permanent. Link returned to his own time, emerging from the gate of time to find the present changed by his actions in the past. The immediate threat had ended. Demise was defeated. Zelda could awaken from her crystal sleep. When the amber shattered and Zelda opened her eyes, seeing Link standing before her, alive and victorious, the relief and joy that flooded through both of them was overwhelming. They had succeeded. The world was safe, but safety came with understanding. Zelda had fully awakened to her memories as Hylia. She knew what Demise's curse meant, understood that this victory was only temporary in the grand scope of eternity. She and Link discussed what should be done, whether to return to Skyloft or remain on the surface. The old woman, Impa, having completed her duty of guiding them, returned to her own time through the gate of time, which then sealed itself forever, ensuring the timeline's integrity. Link and Zelda made their choice. They would not return to the sky. The surface world needed people to rebuild it, to reclaim it from the monsters that still lurked in its wild places. They called down to Skyloft, and slowly, others began to descend through the clouds. The reunification of sky and surface began. The people who had hidden in the clouds for thousands of years came home to a land their ancestors had fled, bringing with them their knowledge, their traditions, and their hope for a new beginning. These settlers spread across the surface, establishing communities in the regions Link had explored. They built towns and farms, temples and monuments. They formed the foundation of what would eventually become the Kingdom of Hyrule, though that name would not be adopted for generations yet. Link and Zelda remained at the center of this new civilization, their heroism and Zelda's divine heritage making them natural leaders. The Master Sword, its purpose fulfilled but its power too dangerous to be wielded casually, was returned to a sacred pedestal. It would sleep, waiting for the day when Demise's curse manifested and a new hero would be needed to wield it. Fi, the sword spirit who had guided Link throughout his journey, entered her own eternal slumber within the blade, her task complete. Her final words to Link were oddly emotional for a being who claimed to be without feelings, suggesting that through their journey together, even a spirit of pure calculation had learned something about the bonds that form between those who struggle together. Zelda renounced her memories of divinity, choosing to live as a mortal rather than reclaim her status as a goddess. Hylia's plan had succeeded, and the goddess herself was satisfied to simply cease existing as a divine entity, her essence fully merged with Zelda's mortality. This choice meant that while Zelda retained some connection to sacred power, she was no longer the goddess Hylia in any meaningful sense. She was simply Zelda, a woman with a divine past but a mortal future. Years passed in relative peace. The surface civilization grew and flourished. Link and Zelda lived out their lives, becoming legendary figures even in their own time, the hero and the goddess born whose love and courage had saved the world. They had children who inherited their remarkable traits, beginning the bloodlines that would carry the spirit of the hero and the blood of the goddess through all subsequent generations. When Link and Zelda eventually passed from the world, they left behind more than just descendants and legends. They left behind a template, a pattern that Demise's curse would force history to repeat. The hero would always be reborn when darkness threatened. The princess would always carry Hylia's blood, and evil would always rise to threaten them. This was the curse's nature, an eternal recurrence that transcended individual lives and shaped the destiny of the world. The generations that followed built upon the foundation Link and Zelda had established. The kingdom of Hyrule took formal shape, with Zelda's descendants becoming the royal family, rulers chosen not just by lineage, but by their connection to the sacred power of the goddess. They learned to harness this power, which manifested differently in each generation but always retained its holy nature. Some princesses could heal with a touch, others could see the future or commune with spirits. All carried within them a fragment of Hylia's divine essence. The Master Sword remained in its place of rest, hidden away but never forgotten. The royal family maintained the knowledge of its location, passing down from parent to child the understanding that one day it would be needed again. They established institutions to protect sacred knowledge, creating what would eventually become the Sheikah tribe, guardians sworn to serve the royal family and preserve the ancient wisdom. Centuries passed, and the world changed. New races emerged or revealed themselves. The Gorons, a stone-eating people who lived in harmony with volcanic regions, became known to Hyrule. The Zora evolved from their more primitive ancestors into an elegant aquatic race who built magnificent cities beneath lakes and behind waterfalls. The Gerudo tribe established themselves in the desert, a nation of warrior women who lived by strict codes of honor. Each race brought their own traditions, their own magic, their own understanding of the world. But as civilization grew, so too did the memory of Demise's threat begin to fade. The Master Sword became a legend, then a myth, then a fairy tale told to children. Most people no longer believed in the ancient curse or the prophecy of the hero's return. They lived their lives in peace, thinking that the darkness had been permanently defeated. This forgetting was dangerous, for it left them unprepared for when the curse inevitably manifested again. The first major resurgence of evil came generations after Skyward Sword's events, though it bore no obvious connection to Demise. Monsters became more numerous and aggressive. Dark forces stirred in forgotten places. The Hyrulean people found themselves facing threats they had not prepared for. Saved only by the intervention of a mysterious tribe of tiny people who had, until that point, remained hidden from the world. These were the Minish, also called the Picori, a race of beings so small that only children could see them. They lived in a parallel dimension that overlapped with the mortal world, appearing only once every 100 years when the Minish door would open, allowing passage between worlds. The Minish were craftspeople of extraordinary skill, creating objects of power and beauty that they would leave in hidden places for humans to find. Many of Hyrule's most legendary items had been gifts from the Minish, though few remembered this truth. When evil threatened to overwhelm the land, the Minish revealed themselves to the royal family. They brought with them a sacred blade and a golden light, tools that could push back the darkness. A hero arose, wielding these gifts to seal away the evil threatening Hyrule. This hero was not Link, not the reincarnation of the spirit from Skyward Sword, but the legend he established would pave the way for future heroes. The Picori blade and the light. Force, as these gifts were called, became treasured artifacts of the kingdom. The blade was sealed away to be guarded until it was needed again. The light force, a concentration of sacred energy that had originated with the Minish themselves, was entrusted to the royal family. Unbeknownst to most, this light force would become intertwined with the bloodline of Hyrule's princesses, merging with the divine power they already carried from Hylia. Many years later, when the Minish door next opened, a new crisis emerged that would test whether Demise's curse had truly taken root in the world's destiny. A young boy named Link lived in this era, an unremarkable child apprenticed to a blacksmith. He had a close friend, Princess Zelda, and together they attended the annual Picori festival, a celebration commemorating the ancient alliance between Hyrule and the Minish. During the festival's tournament, a mysterious warrior named Vati appeared and shattered the Picori blade, breaking the seal it had maintained over evil forces. Vati then turned on Princess Zelda, extracting the light force from her body and leaving her as a stone statue, her life force barely clinging to existence. The kingdom fell into chaos as monsters poured forth from the shattered seal, and Vati claimed Hyrule Castle for himself, declaring his intention to claim the ultimate power he believed existed within the light force. Link, the only witness to Zelda's petrification, was tasked by King Doltus to seek out the Minish and discover how to reforge the broken Picori blade. This quest led the young hero into a world beyond anything he had imagined, shrinking down to Minish size to enter their hidden realm, meeting beings of incredible magic and wisdom, who existed just beyond the perception of adults. Through his journey, Link learned that Vati had once been a Minish himself, a student of the great Minish sage Eslo. Vati's obsession with power had led him to create a magical cap that could grant wishes, but when he wore it, his heart's darkest desires corrupted him, transforming him into a powerful sorcerer consumed by greed. Eslo, transformed into a cap himself by Vati's magic, became Link's companion and guide, sharing wisdom gained from centuries of life among the Minish. Link travelled across Hyrule, seeking the 4 elements needed to restore the Picori blade to its true form. In each region, he underwent trials that tested his courage and ingenuity, solving puzzles that required him to shift between his normal size and Minish size, seeing the world from perspectives most humans could never comprehend. The Minish aided him when they could, these tiny beings possessing knowledge and magic that belied their diminutive stature. When all 4 elements were gathered, Link returned to the elemental sanctuary where the Picori blade had first been blessed. There, the blade transformed, revealing its true nature. It became the Force Sword, a legendary weapon with the power to split its wielder into 4 copies of himself, each possessing the original's strength and skill. This blade had been specifically created to combat certain types of evil, its magic designed to overcome darkness through multiplication of the hero's spirit. Armed with the Force Sword, Link ascended to Dark Hyrule Castle, where Vati had established his throne. The corrupted sorcerer had discovered that Princess Zelda did not carry the full light force within her. Instead, most of it had transferred to Link himself, marking the boy as someone of extraordinary spiritual purity. Vati's attempts to extract this power from Link led to the final confrontation, a battle where the young hero used the Four Swords' power to overcome the sorcerer's dark magic. When Vati was defeated, Eslo's curse was broken, and he resumed his true form as a Minish sage. He used the Wishing Cap's power one final time, restoring Princess Zelda to her living state before destroying the corrupted artifact entirely. Some wishes, he explained, came at too high a price. Power obtained through shortcuts and magic always carried hidden costs, and true strength came from the journey taken to achieve it, not the destination alone. With peace restored, the Minish door closed once more, and Eslo returned to the Minish realm. He would not see Link again, for their time together had reached its natural end. The Minish withdrew from the human world, becoming once more the subject of legend and children's tales. But they left behind their greatest gift, the Four Sword, sealed away for the day when it would be needed again. This adventure established patterns that would repeat throughout Hyrule's history. A young hero, initially unremarkable, would rise to face evil when it threatened the kingdom. A princess named Zelda would be endangered, requiring rescue or aid. Sacred swords would be claimed and restored. Trials would test the hero's worth, and always, the darkness would ultimately be defeated, though never permanently destroyed. The Four Sword itself became part of Hyrule's growing collection of legendary weapons, each with its own purpose and power. But unlike the Master Sword, which slept in complete secrecy, the Four Swords' resting place was known, sealed in a shrine where it could be accessed if the need was great enough. This accessibility would prove both blessing and curse in ages to come. Generations passed after the Minish Cap's events, and Hyrule continued to grow and prosper. The kingdom expanded its borders, establishing trade routes with distant lands and forming alliances with the various races that inhabited the realm. The royal family maintained their sacred duty, each princess inheriting not just the crown but the divine blood of Hylia and the light force that had merged with their lineage. They were more than mere rulers, they were the spiritual heart of the kingdom, living conduits to the sacred power that protected the land. But Demise's curse remained active, working through the fabric of fate like a poison in the bloodstream of history. Evil would always rise, and it often wore unexpected faces. The Four Sword, sealed in its sanctuary, began to call out across the ages to a new threat, a dark sorcerer who had been sealed away long ago and now stirred in his prison, gathering strength for another attempt at conquest. Vati had not been permanently destroyed when Link defeated him with Eslo's help. The sorcerer's essence had been sealed, much like Demise before him, imprisoned in a state between life and death. Over the centuries that seal weakened, and Vati's consciousness began to seep back into the world. He manipulated events from his prison, extending his influence through dreams and dark magic, searching for a way to break free and resume his quest for ultimate power. The opportunity came when a new Princess Zelda and her childhood friend Link ventured near the Four Swords Sanctuary. Vati's power had grown strong enough to manifest physically, if only briefly. He emerged from his seal, immediately kidnapping Zelda and several other maidens, intending to use their sacred energy to fully restore his power. The shrine's guardians were overwhelmed, and darkness descended upon Hyrule once more. Link, compelled by both friendship and duty, drew the Four Sword from its pedestal. The blades, magic activated immediately, splitting him into 4 identical copies, each distinguished by the colour of their tunic, green, red, blue and purple. These 4 links possessed a telepathic connection, able to coordinate their actions with perfect synchronization despite being separate individuals. The Four-Sword had chosen its wielder, and Link, or rather the four Links, began their quest to rescue Zelda and defeat Vati once more. The journey took the four heroes across Hyrule and into strange realms connected to the kingdom through magical portals. They discovered that Vati had created a dimension called the Palace of Winds, a twisted realm that served as both fortress and prison. The maidens were held there, their energy being drained to fuel Vati's resurrection. The four Links fought through this palace, their unique ability to be in four places at once, allowing them to solve puzzles and overcome obstacles that would have stopped a single hero. But as they progressed, they uncovered a disturbing truth. Vati was not working alone. Another entity had aided in weakening his seal, a dark shadow that seemed to possess its own malevolent intelligence. This shadow, known as Shadow Link, appeared to be a dark reflection of the hero himself, born from the Four Swords magic but corrupted by evil influence. The shadow could split just as Link could, creating four dark copies that matched the hero's every move. The battles between the four Links and their shadow counterparts were some of the most challenging conflicts in Hyrule's history. Fighting an enemy who knew your every technique, who could predict your strategies because they thought exactly as you did, pushed the heroes to develop new tactics and deeper cooperation. They learned that their strength lay not just in their individual skills but in their unity, the trust that allowed four separate beings to act as one. When they finally reached Vati in his throne room, the sorcerer had regained much of his former power. He had transformed into a monstrous form, no longer resembling the Minish he had once been. His body was a nightmare of eyes and dark magic, a being that existed more as concentrated evil than as anything truly alive. The battle was fierce, with the four Links attacking from all sides, exploiting openings in Vati's defences through coordinated strikes that a single hero could never have executed. But even as Vati fell, defeated once more, the true mastermind behind his release revealed himself. A massive dark figure emerged from the shadows, introducing himself as Ganon, though this was not yet the Ganon who would become legendary in later ages. This was an earlier incarnation, a powerful sorcerer who had sought to use Vati as a pawn in his own schemes for domination. When Vati failed, Ganon simply absorbed the defeated sorcerer's power, adding it to his own already considerable might. The four Links faced this new threat with courage born of necessity. Ganon wielded magic that made Vati look like a mere apprentice, commanding elements and darkness with casual ease. The shrine around them crumbled as the battle raged, reality itself seeming to warp under the strain of the powers being unleashed. But the Four-Sword had been created specifically to combat such evil, and in the hands of heroes pure of heart, it proved equal to the challenge. When Ganon fell, his essence too dangerous to allow to dissipate into the world, the Four-Sword drew him in, creating a new seal that would hold him prisoner within the blade itself. The four Links recombined into one as the sword was returned to its pedestal, this time with an even greater burden. It now held not just one evil entity but two, both Vati and this incarnation of Ganon trapped within its sacred steel. Princess Zelda and the other maidens were freed, their energy restored. The kingdom celebrated the victory, adding this latest heroic tale to the growing legend of the hero of Hyrule. But the wise understood that this was not an ending, but another turn in the eternal cycle. Evil had risen and been sealed away, only to inevitably rise again someday. The Four-Sword remained in its sanctuary, a weapon of last resort and a prison for ancient evils, waiting for the day when it would be needed once more. The decades that followed saw Hyrule reach its golden age. The kingdom's borders expanded to encompass most of the known world. The various races lived in harmony, united under the banner of the royal family. The Gorons provided metal and precious stones from their mountain homes. The Zora maintained the waterways and guarded the kingdom's lakes and rivers. The Gerudo, though remaining independent in their desert stronghold, established trade relations and occasionally sent warriors to aid in times of crisis. But this golden age contained the seeds of its own potential destruction, for Demise's curse worked in subtle ways. Among the Gerudo, a prophecy existed that once every 100 years, a male child would be born to their all-female tribe. This male would automatically become their king, destined to lead them to greatness or ruin. And in this particular generation, that prophesied male was born. His name was Ganondorf Dragmire, and from childhood he displayed abilities that surpassed even the mightiest Gerudo warriors. He mastered combat, magic, and strategy with preternatural ease. His mothers, the twin witches Kumi and Koteki, who served as the tribe's surrogate parents and advisors, recognized in him something more than mere talent. They sensed an ancient power, a darkness that had been seeking a vessel for countless ages. In Ganondorf, Demise's hatred had found a new incarnation. Ganondorf grew into a towering figure, physically imposing and charismatic, able to command loyalty through force of personality as much as through his position as Gerudo king. But beneath the surface charm lurked an insatiable hunger for power. The harsh desert that was the Gerudo homeland bred strength in its people, but it also bred resentment. Ganondorf looked upon the green fields of Hyrule with envy and rage, seeing the prosperity that had been denied his people by accident of geography. His mothers taught him the ancient magics they had preserved, dark sorceries that had been passed down through generations of Gerudo mystics. They taught him of the Triforce, the ultimate power said to grant any wish. They spoke of legends that claimed the Triforce rested in the sacred realm, protected by the royal family of Hyrule, but accessible to one with sufficient power and cunning. These teachings fell on fertile ground. Ganondorf became obsessed with claiming the Triforce, convinced that with its power he could transform not just the Gerudo lands, but reshape the entire world according to his vision. In this same era, deep in Kokiri Forest, a place where time seemed to move differently than in the outside world, a child was born under unusual circumstances. The Kokiri were a race of eternal children, ageless beings who lived in harmony with the forest, under the protection of the great Deku tree, an ancient spirit who served as guardian of the woods. Each Kokiri had a fairy, companion, a small glowing sprite that guided and protected them. But this new child named Link was different. Link was not actually a Kokiri, though he appeared identical to them and was raised as one of their number. He was a Hylian child who had been brought to the forest by his dying mother, seeking sanctuary during a great war. The great Deku tree had taken pity on the infant and raised him among the Kokiri, hiding his true nature even from Link himself. But the child's heritage could not be completely concealed. Link was the only Kokiri without a fairy companion, a fact that left him feeling incomplete and isolated from his peers. On the day Link finally received his fairy, a sprite named Navi, who had been specifically chosen by the great Deku tree to guide him, everything changed. The ancient tree spirit summoned Link to reveal a terrible truth. The Deku tree had been cursed by Ganondorf, poisoned by dark magic that was slowly killing him. The Gerudo king had demanded access to Kokiri Forest's spiritual stone, one of 3 sacred gems that, according to legend, could open the way to the sacred realm. When the Deku tree refused, Ganondorf had cursed him out of spite. Link ventured inside the great Deku Tree, fighting through monsters that had infested the dying spirit's body, seeking the source of the curse. He destroyed the parasitic creature Goma that Ganondorf had planted within the tree, but the damage was already done. As the great Deku Tree died, he entrusted Link with the Kokiri's Emerald, the first of the 3 spiritual stones, and revealed the truth of Link's heritage. The boy was not Kokiri, but Hylian, and destiny had chosen him for a purpose that would reshape the world. The dying guardian spoke of Princess Zelda, who had been plagued by prophetic nightmares of a dark figure destroying Hyrule. The great Deku Tree told Link to seek her out, to join forces with the princess and prevent the catastrophe that loomed on the horizon. With his last breath, the ancient spirit passed on the sacred duty of protecting the forest to his yet unborn successor, the Deku Tree Sprout, and sent Link forth to face his destiny. Link left the only home he had ever known, venturing out into Hyrule for the first time. The world beyond the forest was vast and overwhelming to a child who'd spent his entire life among the trees. But Navi guided him, and his courage, that essential quality that marked him as the reincarnation of the ancient hero spirit, carried him forward. He travelled to Hyrule Castle Town, the kingdom's capital, seeking an audience with Princess Zelda. Zelda, though only a child herself, possessed wisdom beyond her years, a gift of her divine bloodline. She had indeed been experiencing prophetic dreams, visions of a dark man in black armour who brought flames and destruction to Hyrule. She'd seen a boy from the forest and a fairy of blue light standing against this darkness. When Link appeared before her, she recognized him immediately as the hero from her visions. But Zelda was a princess, and her father, King Doran, controlled access to the sacred knowledge of the Triforce. The king had recently received Ganondorf as a diplomatic envoy, and the Gerudo king had impressed him with displays of loyalty and friendship. Zelda tried to warn her father that Ganondorf was the dark figure from her prophecies, that he sought only to betray them and steal the Triforce, but the king dismissed his daughter's concerns as childish fantasies. After all, what threat could a single man pose to the mighty kingdom of Hyrule? Zelda and Link, both children powerless to convince the adults around them, formed their own plan. They would gather the 3 spiritual stones before Ganondorf could claim them, preventing the Gerudo king from accessing the sacred realm. Zelda held the Ocarina of Time, a sacred instrument that could unlock the door of time when played with the spiritual stones present. If they kept the stones out of Ganondorf's hands, the path to the Triforce would remain sealed. Link's quest took him across Hyrule, from Death Mountain where the Gorons lived to Lake Hylia, where the Zora made their home. In each location, he found people suffering under curses or threats connected to Ganondorf's schemes. The Gerudo king was systematically weakening the kingdom's allies, preparing the ground for his eventual coup. At Death Mountain, Ganondorf's minions had blocked the Goron's food supply, causing famine. At Zora's domain, he had cursed the guardian deity, causing a freeze that threatened the entire water-dwelling race. Link solved each crisis in turn, proving himself not through overwhelming power, but through courage and cleverness. He was still a child, unable to match adult warriors in strength, but his spirit was indomitable. He helped the Gorons by defeating the dragon Volvagia's predecessor, freeing them from starvation. He saved Princess Ruto of the Zora, the future leader of her people, from the belly of the monster Lord Jabu Jabu, lifting the curse that afflicted her domain. In gratitude for his aid, the Gorons gave Link the Goron's Ruby, the second spiritual stone. Princess Ruto, who had developed a childish crush on her rescuer, bestowed upon him the Zora's Sapphire, the third and final stone, declaring it her mother's engagement gift and insisting that Link had promised to marry her. With all 3 spiritual stones in hand, Link returned to Hyrule Castle to meet with Zelda, but he arrived too late. Ganondorf had grown tired of subtle manipulation and diplomacy. He had launched a coup, attacking Hyrule Castle and seizing power through force. As Link approached the castle, he witnessed Princess Zelda fleeing with her guardian, Impa of the Sheikah tribe. Zelda, even in flight, showed remarkable presence of mind. She threw the Ocarina of Time into the castle moat, where it would be hidden from Ganondorf, giving Link the key needed to reach the sacred realm. Link retrieved the ocarina and made his way to the Temple of Time, an ancient structure that housed the Door of Time and the Master Sword's resting place. He played the Song of Time that Zelda had taught him, the spiritual stones resonating with the music, and the great door opened for the first time in ages. Beyond lay a chamber of blue light, and at its centre the Master Sword rested in its pedestal, exactly where it had waited since the age of Skyward Sword. The blade called to Link and he grasped its hilt without hesitation. But the Master Sword had been created for an adult hero, and Link was still a child. The moment he pulled the blade from its pedestal, the sacred realm's magic recognized the discrepancy. Link was the correct spirit, the true hero reborn, but his body was not yet ready to wield the blade of evil's bane. The Temple of Light's magic activated, and Link was sealed away in the sacred realm itself, placed in a state of suspended animation, while his body grew to the age needed to properly wield the Master Sword. 7 years passed in an instant for Link, but for the rest of Hyrule, those years were an age of darkness and suffering. Ganondorf had followed Link into the Temple of Time, arriving just as the hero was sealed away. The Door of Time stood open, the path to the sacred realm clear. But when Ganondorf entered that sacred space and touched the Triforce, the divine relic recognized the imbalance in his heart. He craved only power, lacking wisdom and courage in equal measure. The Triforce shattered, just as it had been designed to do when touched by an unbalanced soul. The Triforce of power, resonating with Ganondorf's hunger for dominance, remained with him, granting him abilities that elevated him far beyond mortal limitations. The other 2 pieces, wisdom and courage, fled from the sacred realm, seeking bearers who embodied their respective virtues. The Triforce of wisdom went to Princess Zelda, who had been wise enough to foresee Ganondorf's betrayal and prepare for it. The Triforce of courage embedded itself in Link's hand, waiting for him to awaken. Armed with the Triforce of power and the might it granted, Ganondorf conquered Hyrule with ease. He transformed the sacred realm into a twisted dark world, his corrupted heart reshaping that paradise into a reflection of his own evil. He declared himself King of Hyrule, ruling from a corrupted version of the castle, which he transformed into a dark tower. The various races suffered under his tyranny. The Gorons were enslaved or fed to a resurrected dragon. The Zora's domain was frozen in eternal ice. The Gerudo themselves, though ostensibly his people, were treated as mere tools for his ambition. When Link finally awakened 7 years later, emerging from the Temple of Light as a young man with the Master Sword in hand, he found a world utterly transformed. The bright kingdom of his childhood had become a realm of shadow and fear. Rauru, the Sage of Light who had watched over Link during his sleep, explained the terrible truth of what had transpired and what needed to be done to set things right. The adult Link who emerged from the sacred realm was no longer the child who'd entered it. 7 years had passed his body by in an instant, transforming him from a boy into a man without the intervening experience of growing up. He possessed the physical strength and capabilities of an adult, but his memories and emotions were still those of the 10-year-old who had drawn the Master Sword. This disconnect between body and mind would colour everything that followed. Rauru, the Sage of Light, explained the crisis facing Hyrule. Ganondorf's power stemmed from the Triforce of Power, making him virtually invincible to conventional attacks. The only way to defeat him was to awaken the 7 sages, ancient spiritual guardians whose combined power could seal Ganondorf away in the sacred realm. These sages existed in every era, though they might not know their true nature. It would fall to Link to awaken them, to help them realize their sacred duty and gather their power against the darkness. But before Link could begin this quest, he encountered a mysterious figure who would become both ally and enigma. Sheik, a member of the nearly extinct Sheikah tribe, appeared throughout Link's journey, offering guidance and teaching him magical songs that would aid his quest. Sheik's knowledge seemed impossibly deep, and their fighting skills suggested training far beyond what most Sheikah possessed. They spoke in riddles and prophecies, always appearing at crucial moments before vanishing like smoke. Link's quest to awaken the sages took him to the 5 temples scattered across Hyrule, each corrupted by Ganondorf's evil influence. The Forest Temple, where the sage Saria waited to be awakened, had been overrun by phantoms and dark magic. The Fire Temple on Death Mountain imprisoned the Goron patriarch Darunia, who would become the Sage of Fire. The Water Temple held the Zora Princess Ruto, now grown into the beautiful leader of her people, destined to become the Sage of Water. The Shadow Temple, a nightmare realm beneath Kakariko Village, concealed Impa, Zelda's protector and the Sage of Shadow. And the Spirit Temple in the desert held Naburu, a Gerudo warrior who opposed Ganondorf and would become the Sage of Spirit. Each temple tested Link in different ways, pushing him to master new abilities and overcome challenges that would have destroyed lesser heroes. The Water Temple, in particular, proved maddeningly complex, its constantly shifting water levels creating puzzles that required both patience and careful planning. But Link persevered, and with each sage awakened, the combined power of light grew stronger. Throughout his journey, Link witnessed the suffering Ganondorf had inflicted upon Hyrule. Castle Town, once bustling with merchants and citizens, had become a haunted ruin filled with rededs, zombie-like creatures that fed on fear and flesh. The Kokiri forest remained sealed behind a barrier that kept the Eternal Children safe but trapped. Lon Lon Ranch, where Link had learned to ride horses as a child, had been stolen from its kindly owner by Ganondorf's cronies. Everywhere he looked, Link saw the consequences of his failure to stop Ganondorf 7 years earlier, even though that failure had been beyond his control. The guilt weighed heavily on the young hero. He had been just a child trying to do the right thing, but his actions had inadvertently opened the path for Ganondorf to reach the Triforce. Every suffering soul, every destroyed home, every dead citizen, all of it could be traced back to Link pulling the Master Sword before he was ready. This burden of responsibility, deserved or not, drove him forward with fierce determination. As Link awakened the final sage, Sheik revealed the truth that some players might have suspected, but Link himself had not. Sheik removed his disguise and Princess Zelda stood before Link, no longer the child he had known but a woman who had spent 7 years in hiding, preparing for this moment. She explained that she had disguised herself as Sheik to avoid Ganondorf's detection, for he had hunted her relentlessly, knowing that she possessed the Triforce of Wisdom. Zelda revealed herself as the 7th sage, the leader of the others, the one whose power would coordinate the sealing ritual. But her revelation came at a terrible cost. Ganondorf had been waiting for exactly this moment, when all 7 sages had awakened and Zelda would finally reveal herself. The Dark King's magic struck like a lightning bolt, imprisoning Zelda in a crystal and transporting her to his tower. Ganondorf's mocking laughter echoed through the chamber as he issued his challenge to Link. "Come to my castle and face me if you dare." Link ascended Ganondorf's castle, a twisted fortress that defied the laws of physics and geometry. The interior was a nightmare of traps, powerful monsters, and obstacles designed to kill anyone who dared challenge the Dark King. Link fought through room after room, occasionally aided by the other sages who lent their power from afar, creating shortcuts and weakening barriers. The castle itself seemed alive with malevolence actively working to destroy the hero. At the tower's pinnacle, in a throne room that looked out over the ruined kingdom, Ganondorf awaited. The Gerudo king had transformed over the 7 years of his rule. The Triforce of power had altered him, making him more than human, less than divine, a being of pure ambition wrapped in flesh. He regarded Link with a mixture of respect and contempt, acknowledging the hero's achievements while mocking his futility. How could a mere mortal, even one bearing the Triforce of courage, hope to defeat someone who wielded the Triforce of power? The battle between Link and Ganondorf was unlike anything the hero had faced before. Ganondorf wielded magic that could reshape reality, hurling energy blasts that could vaporize stone, summoning constructs of pure darkness to attack from all sides. He levitated above the arena, untouchable, raining destruction down upon Link with casual ease. But the hero had learned much over his journey, and he possessed something Ganondorf lacked: the Master Sword, the blade of evil's bane, specifically forged to destroy beings like the Dark King. Link discovered that Ganondorf's magic could be reflected back at him, turned against its caster through careful timing and the Master Sword's power. Each reflected blast staggered the Dark King, bringing him briefly within reach of Link's blade. The pattern repeated: Ganondorf would attack, Link would deflect, and in the moment of vulnerability, the Master Sword would bite deep into evil flesh. Slowly, impossibly, Link was winning, when Ganondorf finally fell to his knees, defeated but not destroyed. Zelda and the other sages combined their power to create a seal. They would imprison Ganondorf in the sacred realm, transforming that corrupted space into a prison specifically designed to hold him. The Dark King would be trapped there for eternity, unable to threaten Hyrule ever again. The plan was sound, the execution flawless, but Ganondorf possessed the Triforce of power, and that divine artifact granted abilities beyond even the sage's understanding. As the seal began to take hold, Ganondorf channeled all of his hatred, all of his rage, all of the power at his command into one final transformation. He invoked an ancient magic, one that had been sealed away in the dark world itself, and became Ganon, a massive beast of pure malice that embodied the curse Demise had laid upon the world thousands of years earlier. This was no longer the cunning sorcerer king. This was hatred made flesh, a towering boar demon wielding twin great swords, each blade as long as Link was tall. Ganon's roar shook the castle to its foundations, and his first act was to collapse the tower around them, forcing Link and Zelda to flee into the ruins below. The structure crumbled as they ran, Ganon pursuing them through falling debris, swinging his massive blades with terrible speed and strength. In the ruins of the throne room, surrounded by fire and devastation, Link faced Ganon in a final confrontation. The beast hide was nearly impervious to normal attacks, but the Master Sword had been forged for exactly this purpose. Link learned to roll between Ganon's legs, striking at his vulnerable tail, the only part of the transformation that the Triforce of Power did not fully protect. Each strike weakened the beast, slowly draining the dark magic that sustained this monstrous form. When Ganon finally fell, stunned and weakened, Zelda used her power to hold him in place while Link delivered the final blow. The Master Sword pierced Ganon's forehead, the blade's sacred power overwhelming even the Triforce of Power's protection. The beast howled in agony and rage as Zelda and the 6 sages combined their magic, creating a seal far more powerful than anything they had attempted before. A portal opened to the sacred realm, and Ganon was dragged into it, still roaring defiance and promises of vengeance even as he was imprisoned. The seal closed, and for a moment, peace descended upon the ruined castle. Link and Zelda stood among the wreckage of Ganondorf's ambitions, victorious but exhausted. The hero had saved Hyrule, but at what cost? The kingdom lay in ruins. 7 years of tyranny had left scars that would take generations to heal, and Link himself had lost his childhood, stolen by the necessity of becoming a hero before his time. Zelda, wise beyond her years and carrying the burden of her divine heritage, understood something that Link did not yet grasp. She had the power to make things right, to undo the damage that had been done. With the Triforce of Wisdom guiding her actions and the Ocarina of Time as her tool, she could send Link back to his childhood, restoring the 7 years that had been stolen from him. But this act of kindness, this attempt to give Link back his lost childhood, would have consequences that Zelda could not fully foresee. When she played the Ocarina of Time and sent Link's consciousness back 7 years to the moment before he drew the Master Sword, she created something that should have been impossible, a divergence in the timeline itself. Reality, which had always been a single stream flowing from past to future, split into separate branches. In the timeline Link left behind, the adult timeline, the hero simply vanished. One moment he stood in the Temple of Time, the Master Sword in hand and the mark of the Triforce of Courage on his hand. The next moment, he was gone, erased from that version of history as thoroughly as if he had never existed. The people of that timeline would have to face the future without their hero, would have to rebuild Hyrule without the one who had saved them. In the timeline Link returned to, the child timeline, he retained all his memories of the 7 years that had not yet occurred. He knew Ganondorf's true nature, knew the betrayal that was coming. Armed with this knowledge, he sought out Princess Zelda and warned her of the Gerudo King's treachery. Together, they took their evidence to the King of Hyrule, and this time, with Link's first-hand knowledge of the future and Zelda's prophetic dreams corroborating each other, the king listened. Ganondorf was arrested before he could enact his coup, tried for his crimes based on evidence of his plots and dark magic. The Gerudo King, his ambitions thwarted, was sentenced to execution. But the Triforce of Power, which he still bore in this timeline because Link's warning had prevented him from ever entering the sacred realm, protected him. The executioner's blade shattered against his body, and in the chaos that followed, Ganondorf broke free and fled into the desert, swearing vengeance against Hyrule and the hero who had ruined his plans. This created a second divergence, a second branching of possible futures. The child timeline, where Ganondorf had been thwarted but not defeated, would evolve differently than the adult timeline where he'd been sealed away. And there was a third possibility, one that existed in potential, if not in actuality. What if Link had failed? What if, in the final battle atop Ganondorf's tower, The hero had fallen and the Dark King had claimed the Triforce of Courage to add to his Triforce of Power. This third timeline, the Fallen Hero timeline, existed as a shadow possibility, a potential future that the goddess's design had accounted for even if it had not come to pass in the main flow of history. In that darkest timeline, Ganondorf would have been sealed away eventually by the Seven Sages alone, but not before he had transformed Hyrule into a nightmare realm, not before countless lives had been lost and the kingdom had been broken beyond easy repair. These three timelines, created by Link's time travel and the subsequent divergence of fate, would each develop their own histories, their own legends, their own cycles of heroism and darkness. In each timeline, Demise's curse would continue to operate, manifesting evil in different forms and calling forth heroes to combat it. The spirit of the hero would be reborn again and again, as would the blood of the goddess, and the incarnations of hatred would rise to threaten them. In the adult timeline, without Link present, the people would face a new crisis when Ganondorf eventually broke free from his seal. They would pray for the hero to return, but those prayers would go unanswered because the hero existed in a different timeline entirely, unreachable across the barrier of divergent realities. The gods themselves would be forced to intervene, taking drastic action to prevent Ganondorf from conquering an unprotected world. In the child timeline, Link would grow up with his memories of the adult timeline intact, living a life that was both normal and haunted by knowledge of a future that would never come to pass. He would eventually leave Hyrule in search of a friend who had been dear to him in that other timeline, setting in motion events that would shape the kingdom's future in unexpected ways. Ganondorf would remain a threat, but one that Hyrule was prepared for, warned by the hero who remembered tomorrow. In the fallen hero timeline, darkness would reign until new heroes arose to push it back, beginning a cycle of resurrection and defeat that would play out across generations, with evil taking on increasingly monstrous forms and heroes becoming more legendary with each iteration. This timeline would see the most overt manifestations of Demise's curse, with Ganon being resurrected again and again, each time growing more bestial and less human. The Triforce itself played a role in these divergences. The three golden triangles separated among Link, Zelda and Ganondorf in all three timelines created a connection between the bearers that transcended normal reality. They were bound together by destiny and divine power, fated to clash across ages and timelines. Wherever one Triforce piece existed, it would inevitably draw the others toward it, creating conflicts that echoed the original battle in Ocarina of Time. In the moments after Zelda sent Link back in time, neither she nor Link fully understood what they had done. They had won a great victory, saved the kingdom and given the hero his childhood back. These were good things, noble goals achieved through sacrifice and courage, but they had also fractured reality itself, creating parallel timelines that would diverge further with each passing year, each developing its own version of Hyrule's history. The sacred realm, where Ganondorf had been sealed, began to heal in the adult timeline. The dark world he had created started to revert to its original paradisiacal state, though the process would take centuries. The Triforce reformed within the sacred realm, the three pieces reuniting now that Ganondorf was sealed away and Link had departed. It waited once more for someone with a balanced heart to claim it, though the entrance to the sacred realm was now guarded more carefully than ever before. In the child timeline, the Triforce remained split, its three pieces carried by their respective bearers. This created a tension that would define much of that timeline's future history. The Triforce wanted to be whole, and it would subtly influence events to bring its bearers into conflict, ensuring that eventually someone would claim all three pieces or die trying. The Master Sword, that legendary blade that had played such a crucial role in events, returned to its pedestal in the Temple of Time in the adult timeline, but in the child timeline it remained with Link temporarily before he returned it, sealing it away with the knowledge that it would be needed again someday. The blade would sleep, waiting for the next hero, the next crisis, the next turn of the eternal cycle. These diverging timelines represented more than just different versions of history. They represented different answers to fundamental questions about heroism, sacrifice, and the nature of destiny itself. In the adult timeline, the question was, what happens when the hero leaves? How do people survive without the legendary figure who saved them? In the child timeline, the question was, can foreknowledge prevent tragedy, or does destiny find a way regardless? And in the fallen hero timeline, the question was, what happens when the hero fails? And how many times must new heroes rise to correct that failure? Each timeline would develop its own answer to these questions, creating three distinct lineages of legend that all stemmed from the same source. The courage of a young boy who drew a sword too large for him, the wisdom of a princess who saw the future, and the power-hungry evil of a king who craved godhood. From Ocarina of Time, 3 rivers of history flowed, each carrying the legacy of Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf forward into uncertain futures. The goddesses, watching from their distant realm, saw these timelines branch and understood that this was not a mistake, but an inevitability. Demise's curse had always implied multiple possibilities, infinite variations on the eternal struggle between light and dark. The timeline split simply made manifest what had always been true, that every choice creates ripples, and some choices create entire oceans of new possibility. And so the stage was set for 3 completely different futures, each carrying within them the seeds of further conflicts, further heroes, and further incarnations of ancient evil. The spirit of the hero would be reborn in each timeline, taking different forms and facing different challenges. The blood of the goddess would pass through different lineages, manifesting different gifts, and the curse of Demise would create different avatars of hatred, each one a unique nightmare born from the same primordial malice. In the vast tapestry of Hyrule's history, Ocarina of Time stood as the crucial turning point, the moment when one timeline became 3, when a single legend spawned multiple mythologies. Everything that came before led to this moment. Everything that came after flowed from it. The boy who saved time had, in doing so, shattered it into fragments, each one carrying forward the legacy of the eternal conflict between courage and power, wisdom and hatred, light and darkness. The fallen hero timeline emerged from the darkest possibility, the timeline where Link fell in battle against Ganondorf atop the Dark King's tower. In this reality, the hero's courage was not enough. The Master Sword clattered from dying hands, and Ganondorf stood victorious over the fallen body of the one who'd been prophesied to defeat him. This single moment of failure would cast a shadow across centuries. Without Link to oppose him, Ganondorf moved swiftly to claim the remaining pieces of the Triforce. He tore the Triforce of Courage from Link's lifeless hand, its golden light dimming as it passed to one whose heart held no courage, only hunger. Princess Zelda, imprisoned in her crystal, could not prevent Ganondorf from shattering her prison and ripping the Triforce of Wisdom from her as well. For the first time since the Golden Goddesses departed, the complete Triforce rested in the hands of a single individual whose heart was utterly corrupted. The power that flooded through Ganondorf in that moment transformed him completely. He became something beyond mortal, beyond even the demon king he had been before. With the full Triforce at his command, he reshaped the sacred realm entirely into the Dark World, a twisted mirror of Hyrule where his evil reigned absolute. The transformation rippled outward, corrupting the land itself. The sky darkened, the rivers ran black, monsters multiplied and grew stronger, empowered by their master's ascension. But the goddesses had anticipated even this darkest timeline. The 7 sages, though Link had fallen, retained their power. Rauru, Saria, Dabrunia, Ruto, Impa, Naburu and Zelda herself combined their strength in a desperate final gambit. They could not destroy Ganondorf, not with him wielding the complete Triforce, but they could seal him, imprison him within the sacred realm he had corrupted, trapping him in the Dark World with the Triforce. The sealing was imperfect, hastily, performed without the hero's aid. Ganondorf remained conscious within his prison, able to exert influence over Hyrule even from behind the barrier the sages erected. His monsters remained in the world, leaderless but still dangerous. The land bore the scars of his brief reign, and worst of all, the seal was not permanent. It would weaken over time, and eventually Ganondorf would break free. The sages understood that this was not a solution, but merely a postponement. They had bought Hyrule time, nothing more. The kingdom would need to prepare for Ganondorf's inevitable return, to build defences and train warriors who could stand against the coming darkness. But without the hero, without the reincarnation of that ancient spirit of courage, how could they possibly hope to prevail when the Dark King broke free? Hyrule entered a dark age. The kingdom that had been so prosperous under wise rulers now struggled merely to survive. The casualties from Ganondorf's reign had been catastrophic. Entire regions were depopulated. The Gorons had been nearly wiped out. Zora's domain remained frozen, its people trapped in ice. The Gerudo tribe, shamed by their king's actions, withdrew deep into the desert, some seeking to atone for Ganondorf's crimes. The royal family, though diminished, endured. Princess Zelda, aged by her ordeal but strengthened by her role as the 7th sage, took the throne. She ruled with wisdom born of suffering, dedicating her reign to rebuilding what Ganondorf had destroyed. She knew the seal would not hold forever, and she spent her remaining years preparing Hyrule for the Dark King's return, establishing orders of knights and preserving sacred knowledge that would prove crucial in the battles to come. Generations passed, and the memory of Link the fallen hero became legend, then myth. The people spoke of him as a tragic figure, a hero who had tried his best but ultimately failed. Some ballads portrayed him sympathetically, a brave youth overwhelmed by evil too great for any mortal to defeat. Others were less kind, suggesting that perhaps he had not been the true hero after all, that the goddesses had chosen wrong. The truth that he had been a child forced into an adult's battle was lost to time. The seal on Ganondorf weakened gradually, and even from his prison, the Dark King's influence seeped into Hyrule. Monsters grew bolder and more organized. Dark cults arose, worshipping Ganondorf as a god and working to hasten his return. The Knights of Hyrule fought an endless series of small wars against these forces, keeping them contained but never truly defeating them. Then, centuries after Ganondorf's sealing, the seal finally shattered completely. But what emerged was not the Gerudo king who had been imprisoned. Ganondorf's humanity had been eroded by centuries of imprisonment and the corrupting influence of the Triforce he still possessed. He had transformed fully into Ganon, the demon beast, a creature of pure malice that bore little resemblance to the cunning sorcerer he had once been. This Ganon was more monster than man, driven by instinct and hatred rather than strategy. Ganon erupted from the Dark World with an army of monsters at his back, intent on conquering the surface world and claiming it as an extension of his twisted realm. Hyrule, though weakened by centuries of low-level conflict, was not entirely unprepared. The Princess Zelda of that era, a descendant of the sage who had sealed Ganon originally, possessed powerful magic inherited through her bloodline, and a new hero had emerged, a young man who, while not bearing the spirit of the original Link, possessed courage enough to stand against impossible odds. This new hero, working with Princess Zelda and the sages of that era, managed to defeat Ganon and seal him once again. But the seal was even weaker than the first, a temporary measure that bought only a few more generations of peace. And so a pattern established itself in this timeline. Ganon would break free, terrorize Hyrule, and be sealed away by a hero and princess working together. Each resurrection made Ganon stronger and more bestial. Each sealing was weaker than the last. The Triforce became a source of endless conflict in this timeline. Though Ganon possessed it while sealed, whenever he was defeated and resealed, the Triforce would split apart, its pieces scattering to new bearers. Heroes would quest to gather the pieces, hoping to use the complete Triforce to destroy Ganon permanently. But the curse Demise had laid ensured that such easy solutions remained forever out of reach. Over the centuries, the nature of heroism evolved in this timeline. Without the original spirit of the hero being consistently reborn, different individuals rose to meet each crisis. Some were knights trained in the traditional ways. Others were unlikely champions who discovered courage they never knew they possessed. The bloodline of the goddess remained strong in Hyrule's princesses, but the mantle of hero became something anyone might claim through their actions rather than destiny. The kingdom of Hyrule itself went through cycles of prosperity and ruin. After each of Ganon's resurrections, the kingdom would be devastated, requiring decades or even centuries to rebuild. At its heights, Hyrule was a magnificent realm of art, culture, and magic. At its depths, it was a scattered collection of villages barely clinging to survival in a monster-infested wilderness. This constant cycling created a sense of impermanence, an understanding among the people that nothing lasted forever, and that vigilance was the price of peace. The Master Sword, that legendary blade forged to destroy evil, played a crucial but inconsistent role in this timeline. Sometimes it was wielded by the hero of the age, its power essential to defeating Ganon. Other times it was lost, hidden away in forgotten temples or guarded by trials that no living person could pass. The sword itself seemed to sleep between crises, waiting for a wielder worthy of its power, and in some eras no such wielder appeared. Magic became more prevalent in this timeline than in the others. Perhaps it was the repeated exposure to the Triforce's power, or the lingering corruption from Ganon's influence, but magical ability manifested more commonly among Hyrule's people. Schools of sorcery were established, teaching the responsible use of magical power. The royal family maintained a tradition of magical research, seeking new ways to combat the evil that periodically threatened their kingdom. One of the most significant resurrections of Ganon occurred several centuries into this timeline. The demon beast emerged from his seal with unprecedented power, having spent his imprisonment absorbing dark energy from the corrupted sacred realm. This time, when the hero and princess faced him, the battle pushed Hyrule to the very brink of annihilation. Entire regions were burned to ash. Whole peoples were driven to extinction. The fighting was so catastrophic that it fundamentally altered Hyrule's geography. When this iteration of Ganon was finally defeated and sealed, the toll had been devastating. The 7 sages who had performed the sealing died in the effort, their lives sacrificed to create a barrier strong enough to contain such concentrated evil. Princess Zelda, who had led the final assault, was so drained by the battle that she fell into an enchanted sleep from which she might never wake. The hero who had struck the final blow disappeared afterward, never to be seen again, inspiring legends that he had transcended mortality to become an eternal guardian. Hyrule's recovery from this near-apocalypse took longer than any previous rebuilding. Entire cities had been wiped from the map. Knowledge was lost as libraries burned. Magical traditions were broken as masters died without passing on their wisdom. For a time it seemed as though the kingdom might not survive, that the scattered survivors would devolve into isolated tribes with no connection to their shared heritage. But slowly, painfully, Hyrule clawed its way back towards civilization. New settlements were established on the ruins of the old. Young scholars travelled to distant lands seeking knowledge to replace what had been lost. The royal family, though diminished, maintained the traditions and duties that had defined them for generations, and always they prepared for Ganon's inevitable return. The pattern continued across centuries. Ganon would resurrect in increasingly monstrous forms, each time more beast than being. Heroes would rise to oppose him, some succeeding, brilliantly, others barely managing to seal him away before falling themselves. Princesses named Zelda would wield sacred power, their magic often being the deciding factor in Ganon's defeat. And the people of Hyrule would endure, adapting to a world where peace was always temporary and darkness always lurked at the edges. This cycle of destruction and resurrection had profound effects on Hyrulean culture. The people developed a fatalistic yet determined worldview. They knew that evil would always return, that safety was an illusion, but they refused to surrender to despair. Instead, they celebrated the moments of peace between crises, living fully in the present because tomorrow was never guaranteed. Festivals became more elaborate, art more vibrant, music more passionate, as if the entire culture was determined to prove that beauty could exist even in a world stalked by eternal evil. The legend of the original Link, the hero who fell, took on new meaning over the centuries. Rather than being remembered solely for his failure, he became a symbol of noble sacrifice, of trying even when success seems impossible. Stories emphasize not his defeat, but his courage in facing overwhelming odds. Children were taught to emulate his bravery, to stand firm against evil even when afraid, to do what was right even when the outcome was uncertain. The Triforce itself became almost mythical in this timeline, appearing and disappearing across the ages. Sometimes all 3 pieces would be gathered in one place, creating opportunities for wishes that could reshape reality. Other times the pieces would scatter across Hyrule, hidden in dungeons or guarded by ancient magic, waiting for heroes brave enough to claim them. The complete Triforce was used for both salvation and catastrophe, depending on the heart of whoever wielded it. As this timeline progressed deeper into its own unique history, diverging further from the other timelines with each generation, certain truths became apparent. This was a world of extremes, where the stakes were always highest and the costs always steepest. Heroes in this timeline faced more dire threats than their counterparts in other timelines would ever know. The darkness here was more absolute, the evil more concentrated. But in response, the light burned brighter, the courage ran deeper, and the determination never wavered. The fallen hero timeline became a crucible where heroism was tested and refined across generations. It was a testament to mortal resilience, to the capacity of ordinary people to rise to extraordinary challenges again and again. without the guaranteed reincarnation of the hero's spirit, without the certainty that a chosen one would appear to save them, the people of this timeline learned to save themselves, to be their own heroes when necessary, and through it all, through the endless cycles of resurrection and defeat, through the kingdoms that rose and fell, through the heroes who emerged and the princesses who wielded sacred power, Demise's curse continued its work. The hatred he had proclaimed with his dying breath ensured that this timeline would never know permanent peace, that evil would always find a way to return, that the struggle between light and darkness would continue until the end of time itself. Yet even in this darkest timeline, hope persisted. As long as courage existed in mortal hearts, as long as the blood of the goddess flowed through Hyrule's royal line, as long as people were willing to stand against the darkness, the fight would continue. This was the gift and the curse of the fallen hero timeline. Eternal struggle, but also eternal opportunity for heroism. The child timeline represented a world of prevention rather than recovery. When Zelda sent Link back to his childhood, she gave him the ultimate gift, the knowledge to stop Ganondorf before his ambitions could devastate Hyrule. Link returned to a world still innocent, still whole, still unaware of the darkness gathering at its borders. But he carried with him memories of 7 years that would never happen, of a kingdom in ruins and friends transformed into sages through tragedy. Link wasted no time. He sought out Princess Zelda immediately, sharing with her everything he had witnessed in the timeline he'd left behind. Together, they brought their evidence before the King of Hyrule, and this time their combined testimony could not be ignored. A child's prophetic dreams might be dismissed. An adult hero's memories of a future that hadn't occurred might seem like madness. But both together, corroborating each other's visions with specific details about Ganondorf's plans, could not be easily discounted. The king ordered an investigation into Ganondorf's activities in Hyrule. What they uncovered confirmed Link and Zelda's warnings. Evidence of dark magic, connections to monster attacks, plots to undermine the kingdom's alliances with the Gorons and Zora. The Gerudo king had been careful, but not careful enough to hide all traces of his schemes. When confronted with this evidence, Ganondorf denied everything with the smooth charm that had initially fooled the king. But his denials rang hollow against the weight of proof. Ganondorf was arrested and brought to trial before the Hyrulean court. The proceedings were swift, for the evidence was damning. He was found guilty of conspiracy against the crown, of practicing forbidden dark magic, and of plotting to steal the sacred realm's treasures. The sentence was death, to be carried out in the traditional manner by the executioners of Hyrule. Ganondorf heard his sentence without visible emotion, but his eyes burned with hatred as he looked upon Link and Zelda, the children who had destroyed his carefully laid plans. The execution took place at the Arbiter's grounds, an ancient prison built in the desert at the edge of Hyrule's territory. Ganondorf was bound with sacred chains and brought before the executioners. But when the great blade descended toward his neck, it shattered against his skin like glass striking stone. The Triforce of power, which he still bore in this timeline through events that predated the timeline's split, protected him from mortal execution. In the chaos that followed, Ganondorf broke free of his weakened chains and began to slaughter the executioners and guards. The sages of this era, forewarned of such a possibility, acted immediately. They opened a portal to the Twilight Realm, a parallel dimension that existed in shadow alongside the normal world. This realm was inhabited by the Twili, a race of beings who had been banished there in ancient times, for attempting to claim the sacred realm through force. It was a prison designed to hold those too dangerous to execute but too powerful to contain in normal cells. The sage's magic overwhelmed Ganondorf even through his resistance. They drove a sacred sword through his chest, the Sword of the Six Sages, a blade specifically blessed to pierce even the Triforce's protection. As Ganondorf fell, gasping and dying but not yet dead, they opened the Mirror of Twilight, a gateway to the Twilight Realm, and cast him through it. The portal sealed behind him, trapping him in that shadow dimension where he would remain imprisoned, unable to threaten Hyrule again. But Ganondorf's last act in Hyrule was to curse the sages, swearing vengeance upon them and their descendants. As the portal closed, he transformed the Sword of the Six Sages into a weapon of his own, pulling it from his chest and claiming it as a symbol of his hatred. In the Twilight Realm, he would survive his execution through sheer force of will and the power of the Triforce piece he bore, becoming a lingering threat that would cast a shadow over future generations. With Ganondorf exiled to the Twilight Realm, Hyrule entered an era of peace more stable than in either of the other timelines. The kingdom had been warned of danger and had taken action before catastrophe could strike. Link, hailed as a hero despite his young age, was honoured by the royal family. But the celebration felt hollow to him. He had saved this Hyrule, prevented the dark future he had witnessed, but in doing so, he had lost something precious. In the timeline Link had left behind, among the friends he had made as an adult, one had been especially dear to him. Navi, his fairy companion, had departed after Ganondorf's defeat, flying away without explanation, leaving Link alone. In the child timeline, Navi was still with him, but the departure he remembered haunted him with the knowledge that it would come eventually. More than that, Link felt disconnected from the childhood he had supposedly reclaimed. He had the body of a child, but the mind of an adult who had faced horrors no child should endure. Feeling out of place in the Hyrule he had saved, Link eventually made the decision to leave. He would search for Navi, for the friend who had guided him through his darkest trials. He acquired a horse, the faithful Epona who had been his mount in the future that never was, and departed Hyrule, riding into the lost woods in search of the fairy who had vanished. Princess Zelda watched him go with sadness, understanding that the hero who had saved her kingdom would never truly belong in the peaceful world he had created. Link's journey into the Lost Woods led him into a realm between worlds, a mystical forest where time moved strangely and the boundaries between realities blurred. He travelled through strange lands, encountering peoples and places that existed in folklore but rarely in fact. His quest for Navi became a quest for closure, a search for meaning in a life that had been fractured by time travel and destiny. In a dark forest in a land adjacent to Hyrule, Link encountered creatures that wore masks, beings transformed by ancient magic into twisted forms. These creatures attacked travellers, and when Link defended himself, he found himself facing a being unlike any he had encountered before. Skull Kid, a lonely forest imp possessed by an evil mask of terrible power, saw in Link a threat and an opportunity. Using magic stolen from the mask, Skull Kid transformed Link into a Deku Scrub, trapping the hero in a wooden body. This transformation and the subsequent adventure to reverse it would become legend in its own right. Link pursued Skull Kid to the parallel world of Termina, a realm that existed in a strange relationship with Hyrule, mirroring it in some ways while diverging wildly in others. There, he would face a crisis that threatened to destroy that entire world in just 3 days, forced to relive the same period repeatedly through the power of the Ocarina of Time that he still carried. Link's adventure in Termina was deeply personal in ways his quest in Hyrule had never been. In Termina, he encountered people who resembled those he had known in Hyrule, yet were fundamentally different individuals living their own lives, facing their own struggles. The experience forced Link to confront his own grief and loss, to find healing through helping others, to accept that some things could not be recovered, and that moving forward required letting go of the past. When Link finally stopped the moon from falling and saved Termina from destruction, he did so not as the legendary hero of time, but simply as Link, a person trying to do the right thing. The people of Termina never knew that their saviour was a hero from another world. The masks he had collected, tools that had granted him various transformations and powers, were left behind when he departed. And when his quest finally ended, when he had saved Termina and achieved some measure of peace with his own fractured identity, Link simply vanished from the records of history. What became of Link after Termina remains unknown. Some legends suggest he returned to Hyrule and lived out a quiet life. Others claim he continued wandering, never finding the closure he sought. A few whisper that he became a spirit himself, a golden wolf who would appear in future ages to train the next hero who would bear his name. This last legend would prove to have truth to it, though the full story would not unfold for many generations. In Link's absence, Hyrule prospered. The kingdom expanded its territory, establishing settlements in regions that had previously been wilderness. Trade flourished with the Gorons and Zora, creating an interconnected realm where the various races cooperated for mutual benefit. The royal family, with Princess Zelda eventually becoming queen, ruled with wisdom and justice, maintaining the peace that Link's intervention had secured. But Ganondorf's banishment to the Twilight Realm had consequences that would take generations to fully manifest. In that shadow dimension, the Gerudo King did not simply languish in imprisonment. He plotted and schemed, learning the magic of the Twily, corrupting members of that race to serve his cause. He transformed himself from a prisoner into a would-be conqueror of the Twilight Realm itself, intending to use it as a staging ground for an eventual return to Hyrule. The Twily themselves were a tragic people, descendants of sorcerers who had attempted to claim the sacred realm in an ancient age. They had been transformed by their banishment, their bodies adapted to the twilight, unable to survive in normal light without pain. They lived in a civilization of shadow, neither evil nor good, simply existing in their exile. Ganondorf's presence among them was a corrupting influence, turning some to darkness while others resisted his manipulation. Centuries passed in the child timeline, and a new crisis emerged. Ganondorf, working through a Twily named Zant, whom he'd empowered with dark magic, attempted to merge the Twilight Realm with Hyrule, creating a hybrid world where he could rule supreme. This invasion of Twilight began subtly, with regions of Hyrule being pulled into shadow, their inhabitants transformed into spirits or frozen in time. A new hero arose to face this threat, a young man named Link who bore no conscious connection to the legendary hero of time, but carried that ancient hero's spirit nonetheless. This Link was a ranch hand from Auden Village, living a simple life until Twilight claimed his home and transformed him into a wolf. Guided by Midna, a Twelly princess who had her own reasons for opposing Zant, this Link embarked on a quest to save both Hyrule and the Twilight Realm. The Twilight Princess, as Midna came to be known, represented something new in the cycle of heroism. She was not evil, despite her shadowy nature and initial self-interest. She was not wholly good, willing to use deception and manipulation to achieve her goals. but her partnership with Link grew into genuine friendship, and together they fought to restore balance between the worlds of light and shadow. This new Link discovered abilities the hero of time had never possessed. His wolf form granted him enhanced senses and combat capabilities. He learned that he was one of the light spirits chosen, possessed of an ancient courage that made him immune to the Twilight's corrupting influence. As he restored light to the various provinces of Hyrule, he gathered the power needed to confront Zant, and eventually the true mastermind behind the Twilight invasion. When Link and Midna finally confronted Ganondorf, they faced a being who had transcended his imprisonment. The execution that should have killed him, the banishment that should have contained him, had only made him more dangerous. Ganondorf had merged with Zant's ambitions, using the Twily as puppets to achieve his return to power. But he had not counted on the strength of the bond between the hero and the Princess of Twilight. The final battle against Ganondorf in this timeline was intensely personal. Link fought not as a chosen hero following destiny, but as someone protecting his home and his friend. Midna sacrificed much of her power to aid in Ganondorf's defeat, and Zelda, the Princess of Hyrule in this era, lent her sacred power to the struggle. Together, the three of them managed what the sages alone could not. They destroyed Ganondorf permanently, ending his threat to both realms. As Ganondorf died, he remained standing, the Triforce of power keeping his body upright even as his spirit departed. His last words were not curses, but a strange acknowledgement of Link's strength and his own defeat. The Dark King's reign had finally ended, not with a seal or a banishment, but with true death. The Triforce peace he bore left him, returning to the sacred realm, and Ganondorf's body crumbled to dust. With Ganondorf's defeat, Midna made the difficult decision to sever the connection between the Twilight Realm and Hyrule. The Mirror of Twilight, the only gateway between the two worlds, was shattered to prevent future invasions from either side. Midna returned to her realm to rule as princess, and Link watched as his friend departed forever, the mirror fragmenting into light before vanishing. The goodbye was silent but profound. Two friends parting ways knowing they would never meet again. The child timeline, having witnessed the permanent destruction of Ganondorf, entered an era of unprecedented peace. Without the Demon King's influence, without the constant threat of his return, Hyrule could finally build toward a future unclouded by ancient curses. The kingdom expanded and evolved, eventually establishing what would be called New Hyrule in lands far from the original kingdom. Generations later, this timeline would face new threats, but they would be of a different nature. Without Ganondorf's recurring malice, evil would take other forms. The Demon King Maladus, an ancient evil sealed by the spirits of good. The sorcerer Yuga, who sought to merge with Ganon's remnant power, and other challenges that tested each era's heroes in unique ways. But the permanent defeat of Ganondorf had broken a crucial link in Demise's curse, weakening its hold on this timeline's destiny. The child timeline proved that prevention could triumph over the cycle of destruction and resurrection. By stopping Ganondorf before his greatest atrocities, by imprisoning him before he could claim the complete Triforce, Hyrule had altered its fate. The cost had been high. Link, the hero of time, had lived a fractured existence, and eventually become a spirit of regret. But the benefit was a future where each generation could build upon the last without seeing their work destroyed by recurring evil. This timeline's legacy became one of progress and adaptation, while the other timeline saw civilizations rise and fall in endless cycles. The child timeline saw gradual evolution, each era adding to what came before rather than rebuilding from ruins. It was a testament to the power of knowledge, and the importance of acting on warnings before disaster strikes.